Episode 6, the episode of multiple times of calling back to the Lord of the Rings films, saying, yeah, you remember this, isn't it? Oh wait, no, it's not amazing, is it? Because it's Rings of Poor. And also the utter waste of space. Good news, I don't have to refer to any of the books. Bad news, the reason is because, well, they don't actually do anything from the books at all in this. We have absolutely nothing to go by for the creation of this particular episode. So we start off with the White Orcs and their tiki torches, and a very bizarre occurrence happens when Adar is giving his kind of build-up speech for the orcs to go and kill the few humans that are left. He speaks to them in Sindarin. That's the grey elf tongue, what would become the elvish tongue as a result of the Noldor being the bad guys for having caused everything with the Silmarils and so on. So Sindarin became the common tongue, and Quenya, the high elf tongue, was the kind of the equivalent of Latin in the Middle Ages. It was the tongue of the learned, the people who were keeping the histories and all that kind of stuff. So he speaks in Sindarin. Now, okay, he's an elf, and okay, if as we find out later, we go on this premise that he is one of the elves that Morgoth took right at the very beginning and used to create orcs. Well, okay, he can speak Sindarin. We assume that means he was from the Sindar, or who became the Sindar after the travels from Cuivinen to Beleriand. Or on part of the journey, that kind of thing. Whatever it is, he's speaking in Elvish to orcs. To bloody orcs! These orcs speak the Black Tongue, and they speak Westron, or Common. In fact, I'm not even sure if Westron truly exists at this point, because Westron was effectively a combination of Sindarin and Adunyak, and given that you didn't have that many humans actually in the kind of the western ends of Middle Earth that we have the stories from until the Númenóreans came, and then obviously there was a few, but it was mainly when the Númenóreans came. That's when I believe I'm right in saying that's when Westron kind of developed. So whatever it is, the common tongue that both humans and orcs speak. He speaks that, but he then refers to the Misty Mountains as Ered Weathrin. That is the Sindarin for the Misty Mountains. Now, I'm sorry, that immediately is a red flag for you do not know what you are doing. Now, of course, we already knew this, but it's just showing that all they want to do is they want to throw in, oh, look, we know Elvish. I don't care if you know Elvish. It makes no sense to use it here. And so this rousing speech that he decides to throw in Elvish while speaking in the common tongue, he then decides all of a sudden it's a good idea to switch into Orcish, or the Black speech. I assume it's the Black speech anyway, to speak to the orcs, to tell them to go and attack. I mean, it's purely a case of saying, look, we know some words in these other languages that Tolkien created. Aren't we amazing? That's basically all the writers are doing. It's utterly pointless for the situation that we're in. Either speak to them completely throughout the entire speech in Orcish and send them off, or speak to them in the common tongue and then send them off. Don't flick between the two. The only way you should ever be doing a flick between the two, and I know this because my sister is based in France. She's married to an Englishman who has lived most of his life in France, and they have kids who were born in France, and they have a tendency every now and then, although they tend to speak English for most of the time when they're at home, they have a tendency every now and then to do franglais, where they'll just flick between the two because it's just a natural flow, and they know what they're talking about because both of them speak English and French, so it doesn't matter. But it's a natural flow between the two languages. Here, there's a very, very distinct, we stop here and we change languages and we move on to the next. It's a very clear design within the script, and it makes no sense to the setting that we're in. And so they go, the orcs go to the Elvish tower, and I mean, we don't know how many orcs there are ultimately in this, but we know that a lot die from what happens there, because one elf, Arondir, he manages to bring down the entire tower. He manages to lock all of the orcs inside the courtyard surrounding the tower while the tower falls down, and also manages to cause all sorts of other damage, all on his own. So when the tower falls down, everyone that's inside the tower gets caught, but there's also some who are on the hillside, and it falls down on them as well, and they get hit. And so one elf causes, it must have been the death of hundreds. I mean, if we're going on the very lowest amount, you'd have to be talking at least 50 he's killed, but I would say it has to be at least 100, probably multiple hundreds. One elf. One stupid elf. Okay. Also, Arondir wasn't even leading the army. If we remember back to the last episode, it was all Bronwyn. Bronwyn was saying, aren't I amazing? I'm the leader. I'm going to take you. I'm going to lead you in fight, and we're all going to do this. Arondir just stands there behind her. And it's Arondir who's the one that's doing this. Now, fortunately, that changes a little bit, but he's still basically the cucked leader to her later on. But anyway, moving on. We then get to the ships. They're coming in, and for no reason within the storyline that we can tell in this episode, Halbrand recognises, or rather notices Isildur leaving the quarters where the men are sleeping. Now, obviously, because we know who Halbrand is going to be, that's a callback. That eventually, when Halbrand is revealed to be Sauron, we then will have, you see, he was paying attention, and remember what happens when Isildur cuts off his finger? You remember all of that? It's blatantly just a case of trying to say, look, we fit in with the storyline, even though they blatantly don't, because of all the butchery of the lore, the history, and the general way that the world is that they've done with this series. And then we have this hilarious interaction between Isildur and Galadriel, because Isildur's gone up to have a look to see if he can see land. And Galadriel talks to Isildur about humility, talking about being humble is a good thing, like she'd know. Based on the character that we have portrayed in The Rings of Power, Galadriel wouldn't know humility if it slapped her in the face with a wet kipper, started jumping up and down on her head while screaming, "I am humility." She would not know humility at all, and yet she speaks to Isildur of humility. Then we have this whole thing of why is he up there? He's come to see the land. She tells him he'll be able to see it in a few moments. He says, can you already see it? She says, I've seen it for the last hour, because aren't elves amazing? Again, that humbleness coming out really clearly there. And then we have the appearance of sunlight, as though it's hitting the horizon. All of a sudden you can see everything. And we have a perspective shot where we see the ships all in front of the camera angle. And we can see a huge amount of land. They're so close, they would be able to see that even if it was pitch black. They'd have seen some kind of some kind of elements of it within the dark, with their ability to see in the dark, just in general. Like most humans can see stuff in the dark. The light of the night sky would have meant they could have seen the land. So it makes complete nonsense of the whole thing of, oh, look what I can see which you can't see. I'm sorry, that whole thing, it just makes an absolute mockery of what we're trying to be told by this interaction. Then we have this whole thing, and we'll come back to this later, of make best speed. We're told where they've got to go. And they've got to go to the Anduin, the River Anduin. They're going to go up the River Anduin. They're going to get, I would assume, I'm assuming that that they're going to be aiming for somewhere like the pass where Minas Ithil will end up being built, and that's the pass that they will go through. I mean, I could be wrong. They may need to go even further to where the Morannon ends up being. But regardless, they've got to take their ships first into the Anduin, then they've got to go up the Anduin, and then they've got to get their horses off the Anduin and ride to where the village is that they're supposed to be saving, even though they don't know that they're saving this particular village. It just so happens that the place they end up going is the village that's the all the action that we've been seeing is happening. So we've got that whole setup, which we then flick to the village that needs saving, because obviously all the people that were in the Elven Tower have now gone back to their village because they thought that, okay, we're going to have a big win here with Arondir destroying the tower all on his own and killing all of these orcs, and then we're going to set up for another fight. And so we see them making weapons. Now, I don't know about you, but in a place which used to be an elven stronghold, you would think that there would be enough stuff there that they could have made weapons. There would have been some kind of blacksmith, the ability to make weapons in the Elven Tower. So why on earth weren't they doing this when they had everyone at the Elven Tower building up to protect themselves? And now, when they've lost half of their people, we still have people who can make weapons. Why weren't they doing it once the first half left? Because they obviously needed to defend themselves. Why weren't they doing it then? So we have all of that, and then we have a start of getting them ready for the fight. So they're making these weapons. They're making them really quickly. They're getting ready for the army that will be following them at least the same pace as them, if not faster, because these people are not in the best of states, and they're being tracked by an Orcish army. There, in the time that it takes for them to get from the Elven Tower to their village again, to start up the smithy, to start all of the processes for building the weapons, and then make all the weapons they need for defending the village, which means they'll be making arrows, they'll be making swords, they'll be making spears, they've got their various defences they're going to make, all of that kind of stuff. I mean, basically think A-Team music while it's going on. It'll probably make a little bit more sense. But within all of this, we then have Bronwyn being an absolute waste of space. Utter waste of space. She has absolutely no idea what she's doing. She is completely clueless about how to defend things, and she's leaving it to Arondir to lead everything. But she's still there as the utter waste of space leader. We end up with that glorious line from her saying, "To your posts." She wouldn't know a military post if it stabbed her in the face. She has absolutely no idea what she's talking about yet. She's the one that takes the ultimate glory, because she's the one who's leading her people. And screw the elf, even though she fancies him. Then we have a tender moment between Arondir and Bronwyn. He talks about a tradition of planting seeds. I'm wondering whether that's actually just a chat-up line, because there's nothing ever been mentioned in the books about that. So, or at least as far as I'm aware. So have we got this this elvish chat-up line of let's go plant some seeds? You know, I'll plant my seed. Yay, hey, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. How's your father? And then we have, as part of this conversation, it is believed that there is a Valar who looks after the living things. Now, because he is part of the elves that have been defending the Southlands that report to Gil-galad, that would mean he is part of the Noldor, because the Noldor are still pretty numerous. So he is a Noldor, and if he's a Noldor, that means he's come from Arda. Not Arda. Maybe it is Arda. My brain is going because I'm getting thrown too much rubbish that isn't Tolkien. But he's come from where the Valar are. He has seen the Valar. He would know about that. It's not, as some say, that they believe. It's he knows that there is a Valar who looks after the living things. And then I was saying it all the way in the lead up to it. Don't kiss. Don't you dare kiss. Don't you dare kiss. And they go and kiss. And so I'm holding out for the possibility that we might see the death of Bronwyn and the death of Arondir at some point, if not this episode, then by the end of the series, because this is just it. It's so pathetic the way that they've done this. Why they get to be off on their own somewhere with no one else. So they had this chance from whilst they're supposed to be getting ready for a battle, goodness only knows. But why they decided that this was a good idea when the relationships between elves and humans is few and far between. We have, I've mentioned this in previous videos, but we have Tuor and Idril, Turgon's daughter, and their son. Yes, their son is Eärendil. And then we have Beren and his relationship with Luthien. And they have a son called Dior. And because, I think I'm right in saying that because Luthien decides to go back with Beren, and Beren stays in the halls of Mandos, and there's a big thing about this. This is completely against the order of things, but Beren and Luthien are sent back, and then they die utterly. Both die as humans. Effectively, we're saying that Luthien has become human, so therefore their son, Dior, is human. He marries an elf from Doriath. So that's actually a third. Though because he's descended from elves, you could make an argument to say, well, okay, he's already half elf and marrying. But they have a daughter called Elwing, who then ends up being married to Eärendil, which is where we get Elrond and Eros from. But with all of this, that's 3 at most, and then we have a 4th at the end of the Third Age with Arwen and Aragorn. That's 4. As we will see a little bit later in this episode, they're pushing 2 elf and human interactions within the space of a couple of years. It's beyond insane when you consider that if we count them as having 3 in the first age, there is then over 6,000 years until the next one. Anyway, they have this moment, And then we discover just how idiotic the orcs are. Now, there's an element to which what we find out a little bit later is, okay, fair enough, not a problem, because this was all a hoax anyway. It was a fake push to draw out what the defences would be. But we have the fire wagon, which they're trying to get going for ages. She fails. There's then a fight between an orc that's gone to inspect it, and rather than hearing the fight going on and looking and going and doing something, the orcs just carry on walking in and in and in, and it's just this one orc on their own who kills off the other person. I think it's a woman who's with Bronwyn. And then Bronwyn obviously gets the kill, throws the flaming torch the orc has onto their burning wagon and push it down. And they then say, "Oh, it's missed us," and then they do another one on the other side, so they're theoretically pinned in by fire. And then we have the fight scene with the archers on the rooftops and all this kind of stuff. And it ends up being a relatively easy win, all things considered. I mean, there is a moment where an orc manages to throw a hook and catch Arondir's collar. How that was able to be done, given the nature of the hook and how little a space the collar is, goodness only knows. But we also nearly have Arondir down. I was really cheering on the orc there. That character needs to die. And of course, at the end, Arondir cucked again by Bronwyn. Bronwyn comes in and saves the day, killing the orc that was about to kill Arondir. It was as predictable as anything in this series so far. It really was ridiculous. So Arondir has his life saved by Bronwyn. He also gets a lot of black blood, the orcish blood poured on him. Though we see in a moment that he was lucky he got caught by one particular type of orc. Oh yeah, and we also have an MMA moment where we have a spinning kick from Arondir when he's fighting an orc as well. So clearly, elves trained in MMA by their superiors as part of their training to be elvish warriors. Now, I have to admit, I did like this bit, not because it's good Tolkien, not because it's good an original writing per se, but it was fitting in with the mentality of Adar. That we then find out that most of the people that were fighting for the orcs were actually not orcs, but they were the people that had left to go and swear fealty to Adar, not realising at the time that it was Adar, but the guy who led them thinking that it was Sauron he was going to be swearing fealty to. So I like that touch because it was at least in keeping with the characters that we've been shown, or at least the character we've been shown of Adar. That was a nice touch. As I said, it's not original. This kind of thing has been done many times before, but at least it was something that was in keeping with it. So one compliment. I think I'm right in saying there is a second compliment to come. One more. So I had two compliments from this episode, despite all of the dross that we've got in with it. Okay. So after they then discover that it's their own people they've been killing on the whole, we then have the real orc army appearing, and we start to have a flurry of arrows, and people are getting shot from on top of buildings. And was it Bronwyn's dad, I think? Certainly someone that I think she said dad or father to when he got hit by arrows. And she gets hit, and I'm thinking, yes, are we finally going to see the end of her? Is this going to be one thing that we might see is the turning point for her son when he becomes evil or something? And, well, no, sadly she survives. But there's a complete inconsistency, because some people we see getting hit by one arrow and that's it, they're dead. And others we see getting hit by multiple arrows, or just one arrow and still surviving. So I'd love to know what goes through their heads when, if anything, when they're thinking about who's going to die and who's going to survive on this. So a complete inconsistency on that. And it should also be pointed out that these humans are not Boromir. Boromir gets hit by multiple arrows. I mean, if you read the book, he's hit by far more arrows than we see in the film. And he's still breathing at the point at which he's found by Aragorn. That's because although he's no longer pure in his Númenorian heritage, he still holds Númenorian blood. And so he is more of a man than the average human. But these Southrons, they're just normal humans. They can't take the same amount of punishment as Boromir could, let alone full-blown Númenorians should be able to. Though we will see a little bit later with the fighting that that's not done properly either. So they Bronwyn gets taken into the place I think it was the inn where they were kind of having as their keep, and then her son Theo is forced to be the one to do the second burning of her. So there's a guy who does the rear burning to stop the bleeding, because she's been shot through the shoulder with an arrow. Arondir takes the arrow out, and then he's standing there trying to be all comforting to her whilst telling people what to do. And a guy is behind her, and he burns her at the back to stop the bleeding at the back. And then Theo is forced to do it at the front, and he takes ages, seemingly waiting to do it before eventually doing it. Why would you force the son to do that? It's again a cruelty that goes beyond understanding of normality there. But just as we're about to see things go south, as Adar has come in and he's found what he's looking for, the broken sword hilt thing, and all of a sudden they hear a pounding, and that's because within the space of, well, let's be charitable, within the space of 24 hours, the Númenorians have gone from being, in theory, only just able to see land, if you go by what they say, not what we actually saw with the pan shot. They are so far away from land that humans can only just about see it as the sun rises. They've gone from being that far to getting to the coast, going up the river, getting everything off the boats onto dry land. And bear in mind, nothing exists there at the time. There is no Gondor, there is no Minas Tirith, no Osgiliath, anything like that. There's nothing to enable them to easily offload stuff. So they've got to find a suitable point to be able to do that. They've got everything off. They've got all the soldiers into their armour. They've mounted up and they've rode off. They've gone a fair old distance to get to this this village, and then they're charging in. Now, I can allow an element of saying, well, okay, these are horses that maybe they were blessed by the Valar as part of the going to Númenor from Beleriand, and Númenorians have a greater stamina, as we see with Aragorn in Lord of the Rings, but also in general, Númenorians have a greater stamina than the normal humans, though not at the same level as elves. And so, okay, maybe the horses and the humans can do all of this in terms of the amount of stuff that needs to be done. But in terms of dealing with the travel time, it makes absolutely no sense. Again and again and again, we're seeing this. They do not know how to work out the way that time passes and to fit everything in. Tolkien was very clear about how time passes. If you read Lord of the Rings, it doesn't happen like we see in the films, where you keep on switching backwards and forwards between the story of Aragorn, Gimli and Legolas, and then back to Sam and Frodo. You actually have the first book. It's all about Aragorn and Gimli and Legolas, and they're hunting for Pippin and Merry, and eventually interacting with Gandalf and all that kind of stuff. That's all in book 1. And then book 2, that's all about the journey of Sam and Frodo, and eventually Gollum as well. And you keep on getting harkens back to the timeline, because Tolkien throws in lines like, and at the time that they were doing this, every single time they're doing something that's of major import, there's a time correlation between book 3 to book 4, because ultimately actually Lord of the Rings is 6 books. Fellowship of the Ring is 2, Two Towers is 2, Return of the King is 2. So that's how Tolkien does it. And we have none of that in this. There is no relation to what's going on down their timeline. We're supposed to assume that it's easy to do all of this when it blatantly isn't. So we have that. We also have the fact that the Númenóreans aren't they amazing? They're a harken back to Rohan coming in to save the day at the Battle of Pelennor Fields and all of this kind of stuff, because it's cavalry, so they're all on horses. They all come in, they charge down the orcs, and it's all amazing. Aren't they wonderful? They've done it, and of course Galadriel is at the top of the charge, and she's just the bestest ever. She's absolutely amazing. She does all the horse riding acrobatics. Nobody else does it. It's just her. She'll go onto the side of a horse. Indeed, she goes to the side of the horse before anyone actually does anything to attack her. And then she does it a second time later on. Nobody's learnt from this, so nobody's thought, let's take down the horse. They're just aiming for Galadriel and missing her because she's hiding behind the horse. So, yeah, she's just amazing. She can do everything. Wow, wow, wow. Isn't she wonderful? And then we have a moment where suddenly we pan up and we see the Queen waiting with her generals at the top of a hill watching down. And she notices that Isildur is looking, and the guy who is looking after the horses, she turns to him and she says, "Go." Now, okay, she knows, odds on, that this is Elendil's son. But he's not there as a soldier. He's there to look after the horses. Why on earth do you tell the horse, the stable boy, basically, why do you tell the stable boy to go? To go and do what? He's not there to fight. He's only there to be looking after the horses. That's why he's not in the fighting. But she tells him to go. And so we have we then have this recognition a little bit later on that Adar has run off. Indeed, he's not just run off, he's jumped on a horse and he's ridden off. I think it might have been the horse that Elendil was on, which when we then discover that apparently horses and their riders become effectively as one, they know what each other's thinking. Elendil will tell us a little bit later. Apparently, that only works when it's not being ridden by a bad character, because then they can just take the horse and go, and the horse won't care about the fact that they're being taken by a bad character. But anyway, so Adar races off, and one bit which I did wonder at the time, just before he runs off, is he says to "Hey boy, do you know Sauron?" This character that led all the people that left the Elven Tower to go and swear fealty to Sauron. he's told he's got Adar has a task for him. So I had a feeling that I knew what this was, and we get to see this right at the end. He then rides off with the package in his hands, and there's a long horse chase, and Galadriel's going after him. And just as they set off, Arondir sees what's going on, and so he chases off. Now, if there's a horse chase and they're going in one direction, you would expect that that Halbrand would then go off in. I'm trying to remember. Did I say Arondir? Did it? Because it's Halbrand that follows. Halbrand that follows Galadriel and Adar. So Halbrand, you'd assume he's following directly after Galadriel. However, after a really long chase, we suddenly find that Halbrand, maybe it's that he knows the land so well. That's utter rubbish, given that the theory would be Adar is going in a straight line. Certainly, we've not seen him turn off at any point. But all of a sudden, we see Adar is going, Galadriel behind him, and Halbrand is right in front of Adar, and he goes down. He's the only other person who we see do something that's not just sitting on top of the horse. He leans over to the side, he sticks a spear out, and clearly Adar must have just been staring at Galadriel the whole time, because this guy who is clearly in front of him for some time, and then leans down and sticks his spear to trip the horse up, he doesn't see him at all. He doesn't do anything to react to it. So it looks and comes across as incredibly contrived that Halbrand will save the day, and of course then we have Halbrand getting on top, and he's about to stab Adar through the chest with his spear, having already stabbed him through the hand. And Galadriel stops him. And Galadriel says, "We need him." Remember this. Okay. While she's trying to convince Halbrand not to kill Adar, Adar starts saying things like, "Did I kill or cause pain to someone that you love?" And we have another of these completely made-up phrases of "eat your tongue." Now, if we were doing this properly Tolkienian, it would be "hold your tongue." I can't remember the line that Gandalf uses, but I'm fairly certain it's not "eat your tongue." "Hold your tongue" would be a far more Tolkienian phrase to use. It just sounds silly. Okay, nearly there. So we have Adar is taken back to the village. The orcs that are left are they're cornered up and pinned in wherever they're held, and we find Galadriel. She's questioning Adar. She's trying to find out what's going on. Now, remember that she said, "We need him." She gets so annoyed at him that she eventually, having said at first that she wants to kill off all his orcs before then killing him, so that she can tell him as she kills him, or just before she kills him, she's killed off all his orcs. How evil is that, by the way? She then gets so wound up by him that she ends up taking her brother's dagger and putting it to his neck and saying, "I might as well, or maybe I shall just kill you now." I thought she needed him. And of course, she now gets stopped by Halbrand. Halbrand, who has been declared to be the king of the Southlands, and they're cheering this on a little bit later. Indeed, it's declared by Bronwyn that he is the king, and then we have the "Hail Halbrand" King of the Southlands, or whatever it is they cheer, which is Miriel who is cheering this on. She's the one that starts the cheer. So we are having the ultimate in turnaround for what feminists deem to be an issue with past films, that we're now having a man who is only validated because of women. Okay, so we then have Galadriel, potentially, maybe, because she's had one line from Adar saying maybe she should have ended her search for evil by looking in the mirror. Certainly, based on how she's been portrayed, she is evil, and yes, she should have. But he, as part of this, he says he killed Sauron. He says he split him. No, he opened him up. So another way of saying that there is no Sauron to be looked for now. So pointing us away from is it Halbrand? I forget. Oh boy, too many notes. Too many silly names. Halbrand, yes. So pointing us away from the idea that Halbrand might be, or indeed that anyone might be at this point. And we have this point now where, actually this is before they start declaring him king, where Halbrand and Galadriel are talking, and she's mulling over what's been said to her of being evil, and we almost have another elf and human kiss, because there is a very clear point where there is a recognition of they're saying, you have feelings for me, I have feelings for you. Effectively, they've said this, which is, yeah, back to what I said earlier about elves and humans. Anyway. So we've had that. We then go to the All Hail the King of the South. And then we have a bit where we have Elendil the Horse Whisperer. Now, Elendil was the mariner. He knew how to handle boats. Not sure about whispering to horses. And we're supposedly having a bonding moment between father and son as he's speaking to Isildur about this. And then we have what this is where my second compliment comes in. We have the eruption of Mount Doom, and the whole setup of why it's happening, how it's happening, etc. Utterly stupid. It's the guy that led the rebellion against Bronwyn. He was actually given, when it was Adar saying, "I've got a task for you," he was given the sword hilt. He's gone and stabbed it into himself to cause it to form. He's placed it in the keyhole and twisted it, and it sets off the process that leads to the eruption. The whole setting of that is ridiculous. However, graphically, I thought this looked quite good. You see water flowing down, you follow the water, see where it's going. Eventually, the whole load of water goes into the dormant volcano, which causes it to erupt. I don't know whether that's actually how things would work if this was done, but it looks pretty good. And then we have the eruption happening, and the one final thing that we see is the reaction to the eruption. So the orcs start chanting Udun, 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 the name of the episode. So finally Udun is actually mentioned. We don't know what Udun is, we just know that they're chanting Udun, Udun, Udun. If you know your Tolkien lore, you know what Udun is. I'm not going to go into it right now. But Udun is chanted. We eventually have a reaction from the orcs. They start fighting as the flaming lava starts spewing out and starts to hit the village. And I think I'm right in saying that the Númenóreans suffer their first casualty at this point, because I don't remember seeing any of them dying when they were attacking the orcs to save the village. But now with one of the guards being stabbed by the orcs, the first casualty of the war for Númenor. and everything starts to get set on fire as the flaming lava starts hitting. And there are two reactions. There's those who look to help, including Queen Miriel, and then there's Galadriel, who stands and stares, and as we see the smoke and the cloud of ash starting to come, she's standing there and she gets enveloped in it. Now, fortunately, she does at least close her eyes when this happens. But Galadriel, commander of the Northern armies, amazing heroine for all, doesn't bother to help. And it does my nut in. The Queen, the arrogant Queen of Numenor, Miriel, she's there, she helps, she does what she can to get people to safety, even though she says get to cover, when clearly if you get inside a building, the building's then going to be set on fire and, well, you're done for. Elendil chases after the Queen to try and get her to safety, because that's part of his job, isn't it? Galadriel stands there, she looks, and she does nothing. Now, she knows about volcanoes doing this kind of thing. This is what Morgoth did with Autumno. This is what he did with Angband. The whole way that he was able to get orcs covering more and more ground was he had his mountain pouring out more and more smoke, which covered the sky, so that the sun couldn't get through. So orcs were happy to go about a lot more. So she does absolutely nothing, and the episode ends with her being swallowed up by the smoke. She's an utter waste of space. She can ride, but she didn't end up catching Adar. She can ride the horse. She even managed to do a little bit of horse chatting herself, where she put her hand on the side of the horse and there was some kind of whispery voices going on at that time, and the horse seemed to speed up. She didn't catch him. She says, oh, you're about to be able to see land, when land is so bloody close that she could have said, well, you can see it now already. You just need to look. Stop looking over there where the water is, but look where the land is. She's such a waste of space. She and Bronwyn, birds of a feather, utter wastes of space. So, congratulations, Rings of Power. You've got two compliments from me. The way that you killed off most of the rebels from the Southron village, yeah, okay. At least it fitted with how things are going, even if it makes no sense from a lore perspective. And then the second thing, at least the explosion of Mount Doom looked good in the whole process of it happening. But none of this helps with the fact that this whole story is not fitting with the lore. It's not fitting with the history of Middle-earth as established by Tolkien, that is established within the details that they have, that they've paid for, because they paid for the list of things that go through the history of the ages, whatever it's titled as. The timeline for Middle-earth, including First Age, Second Age, and Third Age. We have all of this, and yeah, they can't be bothered to do the things that would still give them perfectly good, exciting storylines to tell. No, they've got to create a whole host of other things which are utterly irrelevant to Tolkienian lore, to the Middle-earth themes that are clearly there from the start all the way through. No, they've got to create their own thing. They've got to tell the story that Tolkien never told. There's a reason Tolkien never told it. This is not a good story. It's crap. It's crap. Rings of utter waste of space. I'll see you in the next one.